Good morning, and welcome to the 2014 Leather Hall of Fame induction ceremony, saluting the men, women, and organizations that have blazed a trail for kinky people everywhere. Please welcome the founder and chairman of the Leather Hall of Fame, Bob Miller.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernest. A round of applause for Ernest Behrens for putting together this ceremony. The Leather Hall of Fame was established 6 years ago. Its purpose is to honor substantial contributions to the modern leather community, defined as 1950 to the present. A little bit about the mechanics. Anyone can nominate anyone else for the Leather Hall of Fame. Each year, a board of leather academics, organizers, and historians from around the world deliberate and vote by secret ballot to select 3 inductees per year. This is our 6th year, and we are proud to have 2 Leather Hall of Fame inductees in the room with us tonight. I think they're in the room, Mr. Chuck Renslow and Mr. Guy Baldwin. The 3 stories you will hear in the coming hour are important ones for our community to know and remember. I would like to, at this point, introduce the administrator of the Leather Hall of Fame, my good friend from Chicago, Mr. Jeff Willoughby.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My duty, according to my instructions here, which I must follow to the letter, are to announce the inductees, the people who will induct, rather, Cynthia Slater, our first inductee into the Hall of Fame. We have with us educator, psychotherapist, and 2012 Hall of Fame inductee Guy Baldwin, along with, wow, that's a list. Wow, that's cool. Activist, cultural anthropologist, associate professor, and Leather Hall of Fame governor, Gail Rubin. So they're going to induct now Cynthia Slater. Yes. Okay.
Good morning, or I guess it's afternoon by now, probably. There's useful information about Cynthia Slater in the program that you have on your tables. So I'm not going to bore you by repeating any of that. Read it at your leisure. In late 72 or early 73, I really can't remember which, I was sitting at home one Sunday morning in San Francisco with my roommate, Don Levine, after having drugged myself in after a very busy Saturday evening. And I was trying to sort of get my wits about me, and Don had somehow found a copy of the Berkeley Barb, which was a counterculture newspaper. And I had never really seen an issue of the paper before. It was a little rag, pulpy thing. And I started looking through it. And in the back, there were all these classified ads, and I'm looking through the classified ads. It's a straight paper, really. And there, a 2-line ad about that thick said, "Meeting for fans of S&M and BND," and a phone number. And I showed it to Don, and I said, "Don, do you know anything about this?" He said, "No, I've never seen it before." I said, "I think I'm going to call It was a San Francisco phone number. I lived there then. So I call the number, and the phone is answered by a woman who had a voice about an octave below Lauren Bacall's. It's very gravelly, deeper voice than mine. And hello? Yes, I'm calling about the ad. What ad? Well, the ad that's in the Berkeley Barb. Oh, what about the ad caught your attention? So this conversation began to unfold between me and this woman. And she basically took my temperature over the phone. I mean, she did everything but stick a thermometer up my ass to find out whether or not I was worthy of the information that I wanted. And at length, I apparently passed muster. And she said, well, we're having a meeting over in my home out in the avenues. And she gave me the address. She said, 8 o'clock. So at the appropriate time, Don and I showed up at the front door, knocked on the door, and the door opened, and here we walked into a big living room, and all the furniture had been pushed against the walls. And here in the living room were, I don't know, somewhere between 15 and 20 extremely nervous straight people. And I knew they were straight because they were all in double knit. Well, it was a real easy tell, you know? And we walked in, and geez, there's no other gay men here. So we sat down, quiet, and put our backs up against it, whatever. And so pretty soon, at the appointed hour, Cynthia stood up, and she said, hello, my name is Cynthia. Welcome to the Society of Janus. And we're all here because we've all responded to the ad that was in the Berkeley Barb. And let's find out who's here. My name is Cynthia. I'll talk a little bit about myself. She worked as a pro dom. And my first thought was, this woman is after clients. You know, she's trying to do outreach for work. And she said, but I'm really a submissive. Like, we've never heard that story before. And she said, and I've been interested in the lifestyle for blah, 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 blah. It turned out I was sitting next to her. And so when it was my turn, I said, hello, my name is Guy Baldwin. I'm an out gay man. I've been into BDSM since I was a teenager. And I do activity A, B, C, D, X, Y, and Z. And I went through the list of my credentials. And people in the room were like, everybody went around. Some people passed. Every time there was a knock on the door because somebody was late, all the straight people went, like they were going to get busted. That like there was going to be police come through the door and arrest these people simply because they had gathered. That's how I met Cynthia Slater. She talked me into staying afterwards. I was 26 years old at the time. She talked me into staying afterwards, and she, of course, wanted to pick my brain. And it became evident very quickly that I knew more about kink than anybody else in the room did. So she naturally wanted to pick my brains. And pick she did. So we decided that we'd create an educational program for the people who were willing to sign up on a sign-up sheet for the following meeting. And in that way, I started supporting her as she had created the Society of Janus. After about a year and a half, she started to burn out because she was running the whole thing kind of out of a hat. And she needed help. And she basically said that she was going to close up Janus. And we said, no, you can't do that. So a bunch of gay men said, well, we're going to help. This is too important a resource. We can't allow this to fold. And Janus was reorganized in 1974. That makes this year the 40th anniversary of the most important educational institution on the West Coast. Cynthia Slater did that. And that's the reason why she deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. The guys here have created a little video clip to show you about Cynthia. And once you've seen that, I'll ask Gail Rubin to come up here and take the granite dildo that is the award for the Leather Hall of Fame. Let me step out of the way here. Roll the tape, guys. Thanks.
Hi, Cynthia, it's Christina. You know, I'm going to tell you a little something. We never met, but I love you. I love you because you lived your authentic life out loud. You know, what you did paved the road for me, that as I take my journey, I don't have as many trip-ups and as many political catastrophes I must deal with because of who I am. I have to think that back in the mid-70s and throughout the 80s, that being out there overt as a bisexual woman and a type of versatile SM player, both a top and a masochist, you know, must not have always been easy. You probably had a lot of explaining to do to people and a lot of justifying who you were. But it's thanks to you and for your dialogues and your educating that me, a modern woman, a modern queer, bisexual, versatile SM player, gets to be me with minimal stigma. It takes people to break barriers, and you are one of those barrier breakers. You are one of the barrier breakers when it comes to women entering men's space, accepting invites into the catacombs, and going and playing with the men and being seen by the men as an SM player, and then returning into that men's space with additional women and showing them that SM is SM. As a result of that, in the world that I live in, there's a greater unity between all SM and BDSM players. It's still in the works, but it's so much different than it used to be. And I get to be with my brothers more often than perhaps the women in your era were. I thank you for that, and I love you for that. Thanks, Cynthia.
One last note. In in late 1975, I came down with a really nasty case of hepatitis. And when I mentioned that to my friend Cynthia, she said, well, you need care that you're not going to get where you live now. She said, you're going to move into my guest room in the back room. I was sick. I said, okay, that's fine. So indeed she did. She moved my ass lock, stock, and barrel into her back bedroom. She was a pro dom, remember, and so she was turning tricks in the front room. And said, you know, you have to be very quiet while I've got Johns here coming, because if they find out that anybody else is here in the house, they're going to spook and they're going to run. So, sick as I was, I had to lay perfectly still in a squeaky bed while I had to listen to her torturing men in the front room. Anyway, that was Cynthia Slater. All that said, it is my great honor and pleasure to invite Dr. Rubin to the stage so that I can hand this thing off to her. Take this. Here we go.
Is this on? Yes. I'm thrilled to accept this award on behalf of Cynthia Slater, and I do so in part because of the immense debt that I owe her. She deserves this recognition for her many contributions to kinky people, and particularly kinky women. But my own gratitude is also personal, because without her peculiar social and sexual genius, my life would have turned out very differently. I came to San Francisco in the late 1970s to do two things. One was a dissertation on the gay male leather population, and the other was how to figure out how to live my life as a budding pervert. And it was possible for me to do both of those things because of several things that Cynthia had had a hand in. One was the existence of an accessible SM community. There was also a small network of women who were doing SM together. And there was also a willingness on the part of many individuals in the gay men's community to allow some women into otherwise all-male enclaves. And Cynthia had been a key person in establishing each of these things, although at the time, I had no way of knowing this. She had done a great deal to transform the sexual landscape I was about to explore, both personally and intellectually. And although Cynthia mostly worked locally in the Bay Area, her impact extended well beyond that. Without the trails that she had blazed for women in the San Francisco area, there probably never would have been the first lesbian SM organization, Samoa, which was founded in 1978. And Samoa then sparked an unprecedented efflorescence of lesbian SM organizing. It was quickly followed in the early 1980s by LS&M in New York, by Leather and Lace in Los Angeles, and by a number of other groups for kinky women that suddenly sprang up like mushrooms after a rain. And one perhaps little-known fact is that the gay male SM activist, the GMSMA in New York, was partly inspired by and modeled after Samoa. GMSMA was the first social, educational, and political organization for kinky gay men, and many other groups followed its model. One of Cynthia's most enduring legacies was the unusual character of the mixed-gendered and multisexual SM community that grew up in the Bay Area. She created bridges that linked gay men, straight people, lesbians, bisexuals, and trans people, but in a way that valued and preserved their unique identities and preferences. This allowed for coalitions that maintained the integrity of these participating groups and communities and individuals. And so political cooperation and even shared sexual party spaces did not result in the collapse or dilution of those distinct groups into one undifferentiated soup. People from the Bay Area brought this model of leather organizing into the early efforts at national leather organizations in the 1980s. And if it has not always been realized, it still remains an important goal that we find ways to do things together without losing the sparkling brilliance of the leather mosaic. And Cynthia was probably even more effective as a student and teacher of ethical, adventurous, and knowledgeable play. She sought out the most skilled practitioners, one of whom is with us today, and he brought in many of his good friends from whom Cynthia, whose brain she also picked. And then she passed on what she knew to others, and she did so with a set of consistent values. And I just wanted to enumerate those for a moment. One was the validity of switching for those who enjoyed it, respect for those who didn't want to switch and whose role preferences were fixed, the dignity and worthiness of bottoms, and the need to nurture tops. She demanded always that SM be a fair exchange, and although she treasured technical mastery, she treated it as a means to an end, the production of pleasure, intimacy, exploration, and ecstasy. Cynthia did a great deal to make the world a better place for kinky people, and especially kinky women, and she sure did a hell of a lot to make it a better place for me. And now I have a special treat. I want to, there are only a few of us here who knew Cynthia personally, but I'd like to recognize one more. Cynthia's lover and partner during the last 2 years of her life, Chris Schwartfeger. Chris, would you come up and say a couple of words?
Thank you. Thank you. Just brief and to the point, Cynthia Ann Slater would be Ooh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Cynthia Ann Slater would be enormously proud, pleased, and so deeply honored to be amongst all you gay, straight, leather men and leather women, some nice, some not so nice. And I think it would be so wonderful to be a fly on the wall in the great dungeon in the sky. Just imagine. And finally, I'd like to say thank you from the bottom of my geriatric heart for this honor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome author, educator, member of the Board of Governors of the Leather Hall of Fame, and the Mr. Marcus Hernandez Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Race Bannon.
Good afternoon. Today we are inducting John Embry into the Leather Hall of Fame. And while Mr. Embry did many good things in his lifetime, if we get honest, the reason he is being inducted today is for his founding of the iconic magazine, Drummer. Considering the impact that Drummer had on me and countless others, and I contend the entire leather kink culture, that is reason enough. How many people in this room have read Drummer magazine? Raise your hand. How many people feel that Drummer magazine has directly influenced your leather and kink life? How many people feel that our scene would be significantly different today had Drummer not existed? Drummer was pivotal in creating a bonded network of men who did not always have a sense of belonging elsewhere in the mainstream gay men's community. The magazine served as a communal forum for often isolated individuals and allowed for existing leather and kink institutions to be more readily identified and accessed. But perhaps, most importantly, it generated a common culture and shared language that helped integrate local networks into a more national and international conversation. It gave these men images, stories, information, commentary, products, and ideas to jerk off to relate to identify with, and that served to empower and grow a fledgling network of leathermen. You can read a much more detailed accounting of John Embry's life and the life cycle of Drummer magazine in the program for today's induction, and I encourage you to do so. But in the interest of brevity, I will focus on a few important insights into John Embry and Drummer magazine. John Embry was born in Winslow, Arizona, 1926. I and others were unable to uncover a lot about his childhood. One thing we do know is that he was the art director at his high school newspaper. After high school, at the age of 18, he moved to Los Angeles to attend art school. He joined the armed services in 1949, and following his military service, began a career in marketing and advertising, and Drummer magazine was in many ways a natural extension of that marketing and advertising career. You can read in his bio some of the presumed initial origins of Drummer magazine, but it's best to get it directly from John Embry's mouth. In issue 188 of Drummer magazine, John Embry penned an article about Drummer's origins, and in that article he said, "Unlike popular conceptions, Drummer was not born like something in an Andy Hardy movie, with lots of enthusiasm and offers of Judy Garland's garage for a theater. It wasn't even like Shel Silverstein's wonderful concept of Playboys beginning, with all the fellas standing around the steps of a Chicago brownstone, deciding who was going to be the editor, the art director, and who would recruit the centerfolds. Drummer was conceived in Los Angeles on a Saturday morning in 1975 when my lover Don was out on one of his interminable disappearances. It was a solitary, if not immaculate, conception in the form of an ad in the Leather Fraternity newsletter I was putting together. The publication was already running 8 to 12 pages. Why not embellish it and make it some sort of small magazine? What the hell, I'd always been a frustrated publisher. So I pasted together a half-page pitch for something, christened it Drummer, with little, if any, idea what it would or should look like. Perhaps the original intent of Drummer was not well thought out, but the happy accident was its critical role in the creation of an international leather, BDSM, and kink community. As the result of that perhaps less than immaculate conception, the first Drummer came off the press on June 23rd, 1975. The name of the magazine, Drummer, is a reference to a quote by of book Walden by Henry David Thoreau, one of my favorite books, actually. The quote is, "If a man loses pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music he hears, however measured or far away." Embry did indeed hear a different drummer, and he also did indeed step to the music that he heard. He was a unique, and perhaps unconsciously at times, a visionary man. When Embry was asked what made him want to be a publisher, he said, "Inborn, I guess. I can remember as a schoolboy putting out a 4-pager in grammar school by the simple method of drawing in pencil. They didn't trust us with pen and ink yet. And typing each copy by hand. It was simple and direct, and my friend Conrad and I would spend hours in the evening on the finished product, such as it was. That's all he and I did those evenings, unfortunately, but you're pretty young when you're in elementary school. Then Conrad got his little hands on a discarded hectograph known as a ditto gelatin roll that did an amazing thing. It made copies. I knew how Gutenberg must have felt. So, even in grammar school, and we know in high school, Embry's path toward becoming a publisher was already underway. Embry saw Drummer magazine in many ways as a publication of liberation. He had a history of wanting to liberate gay men and did a great deal in that regard, in which again you can read about in detail in the bio program. And he saw Drummer magazine as no different. It was a vehicle of liberation for gay men who had sexualities and identities that did not sync with the mainstream of gay life. Of course, not everyone held the magazine in high regard, at least initially. When a prominent San Francisco BDSM and kink organization reviewed Drummer in its newsletter, they said, "Drummer is a bummer. Too slick, too commercial." Luckily, thousands upon thousands of leathermen felt differently, and they embraced Drummer as their publication of record, their source of erotic inspiration, the template from which they built entire erotic and social lives. This theme of liberation was well illustrated when Embry was asked what sort of satisfaction the publishing of Drummer brought him. Here's what he said: "A tremendous amount, sometimes in very personal ways. We constantly get mail from guys who say how Drummer has helped them come to terms with their sexuality and their lives. I particularly like to hear from someone who found that he shares a specific sexual identity or fetish that other men enjoy. and that through drummer, they have learned to explore the possibilities of their sexual, physical, and emotional selves. In a way, that is what they are saying when they write to us that drummer is a turn-on. Embry also echoed the theme of liberation when he was asked why publishing drummer was so deeply satisfying and important to him. And he said, the most gratifying correspondence came from readers across the United States who had long considered themselves the only queer in town with their particular fetish. When they discovered themselves in drummer, they knew they were far from alone wherever they lived. That encapsulates the power and importance of Drummer Magazine in our lives and why John Embry so richly deserves his place in the Leather Hall of Fame. We might not be here today were it not for John Embry and Drummer Magazine. We most certainly would not have so readily adopted its imagery and messaging as the foundation upon which many of us constructed our erotic dress, identities, sexualities, social norms. We all owe a huge thanks to John Embry and every single person involved in the creation and publication of Drummer Magazine. So it is a true honor to be able to say today that John Embry has now been inducted into the Leather Hall of Fame. Mr. Embry, the universe decided to take you from us in September of 2010. But you and your important work have not been forgotten. All of us owe you a huge collective thanks. John Embry, as the founder of Drummer Magazine, influenced an entire generation of gay leathermen, created images and stories and ways of connection that men didn't have before drummer existed. It was all done in a kind of tribal fashion before, and we didn't have a publication that would allow us to connect and to build a community in the way that drummer allowed us to do. That's why John Embry really does deserve his place in the Leather Hall of Fame. I am not sure the gay men's leather community, the kink community, would look like it does today if drummer had not existed. Well, I said something good there. I would like to present Rick Storer of the Leather Archives and Museum to accept for John Embry.
As a representative of the Leather Archives and Museum, it is my honor and privilege to accept the Leather Hall of Fame award for John Embry into the Leather Archives and Museum. Thank you.
Welcome back, the chairman and founder of the Leather Hall of Fame, Bob Miller.
Yes, my name is Bob Miller, and I have been an associate member of the Chicago Hellfire Club since 1998. 15 years before that, in 1983, I was a newly graduated from University of Minnesota, and I moved to San Francisco. And I had just met a man named Ken Hedrick, who now owns Stompers Boots. And one night after work, Ken asked me to meet him in a restaurant. His friend from New York was visiting. And so I went, and his friend was this fast-talking lawyer from New York. And he was very entertaining to listen to. And all he could talk about was this thing Inferno and this guy Robin who could take so much. And the level of the SM there was really, really something I wanted to experience. So for the next 15 years, whatever city, whatever bar I was in, I looked for guys that had this on the back of their vest. For good reason. I had great times with those men, and I knew I could trust them with a heavy BDSM scene. That's what those colors meant to me, and what they mean to a lot of us. Eventually, I moved to Chicago, and I joined the CHC. Inferno 27 was my first time there. I was very shy. But I was new meat, and I was obviously there for a reason. And my first scene, while on duty, emptying trash in the beer tent, my supervisor was a man from Cleveland, of all places, named Tony Cahoot. And he said part of the job was that he could punch me pretty much anywhere. And I thought he was like the hottest guy I'd ever seen, so I liked that job. The next night... The next night, I got double-teamed by two men from California, inside and outside, and tied to trees, and one tent to this tent. I was bullied, I was whipped, I was terrorized, and I was never the same. I went back to Inferno every year. You know, back in 1998, or back in 1983, I knew that I would get to Inferno someday, listening to Ken's friend. But I never would have imagined that I'd get to be here and to have the privilege of handing that very man a Hall of Fame trophy for the Chicago Hellfire Club. But that day is today, and it is my great honor to induct the Chicago Hellfire Club into the Leather Hall of Fame.
I think our group has had a lot of influence in the community over the years. We've had a lot of people that would be considered prominent in the leather community, but a lot of people that aren't. We've had a lot of good people that are skilled in their dungeon and their dungeon skills that they've shared with others and have been part of that group. I think we've been able to contribute. I think the event that we hold annually, Inferno, is probably one of our greatest contributions. It's one that probably people recognize from around the world and aspire to be invited to. It's one that we don't want to say it's elite, but it's a small group that can come every year. We have limited amount of people, so not everyone can come. And so when you do get that invite, it's very much, a lot of people look forward to that in their leather career. I think that's probably one of the greatest things that we've done for the community, is give them that unique vacation experience. Being able to go away for up to a week and enjoy a leather SM event that is exclusively for us and for what we strive to accomplish.
Well, as a leather club, one of the oldest leather clubs, we're still here. Every couple years we go through a metamorphosis and get new people, 450 plus members internationally wide.
going to say people around the world love that. Okay. It's my honor to introduce my fast-talking friend from New York since 1983, CHC honorary member, Mr. John Enteman.
Thank you, Bob. I do remember that night in San Francisco, and it was, as they say, a night to remember. Ladies and gentlemen, as an honorary member who joined as an associate, it is my particular honor to stand before you today on behalf of the Chicago Hellfire Club. In August of 1971, almost 43 years ago, 13 men joined together and formed a club to celebrate and have gay S&M sex. They would not necessarily ride motorcycles, although that was fine. They would ride each other and their sponsored guests. And they would do it together. The times were different then, and this was a notable and challenging undertaking. Doing it together led the Chicago Hellfire Club to develop rules for group S&M courtesy, and when the AIDS crisis came down upon us, safer sex guidelines for BDSM play, both of which are regularly updated and, we are delighted to say, used by many other BDSM groups. Doing it together also meant and means that club members and their sponsored guests have the opportunity to teach what they know and to learn about BDSM play, so that each of them can go forth and spread the good news. In 1976, the club's annual anniversary bar night event, called Inferno, became an overnight run. From that, Inferno has grown into a 6-night run, called this year Inferno 43, which we will host this coming September at an undisclosed location, as we ask everyone present to communicate no more precisely than, quote, on the eastern shores of Lake Michigan, end of quote. Inferno may no longer have a Chateau Merde as it did at Inferno 11, which was my first. My God, that was almost 32 years ago. But we do have the whipping tent, the bondage tent, the, quote, music, end of quote, room, where one can make all the noise one wants, or one wants his bottom to make. Lots of BDSM equipment in the outdoors to be used rain or shine. After all, being wet can be erotic. and, of course, the sleaze tent. Inferno is more than an event for BDSM play. It is a celebration and manifestation of brotherhood, and for many, it is a family reunion. For me, on the day after my father was buried, I wanted to be at the opening of Inferno 14, and I was. When the Chicago Hellfire Club decided in 1989 it should have a permanent clubhouse with a fully equipped dungeon in Chicago, Illinois, it was the worldwide, not just the Chicago-based, members, Inferno guests, each of whom had been sponsored by a member, and friends of the club who made this possible. The tragedy of Tuesday, September 11, 2001, occurred on the last full day of Inferno 30. All the members of CHC at Inferno 30 banded together and took care of every man at Inferno 30. Mental health professionals provided counseling for those who desired it. Travel agents helped those who needed it. The run was extended so that every man who wanted a place to stay and men to be with and play with, if that's what they both wanted to do, until the planes started flying on that Friday, had it. It has been said that for the Chicago Hellfire Club, it was its finest hour. Brotherhood also means taking care of those who need it. The McAdory Fund was established by the Chicago Hellfire Club soon after the death of our fellow member, Michael, also known as Mac, McAdory, on October 20th, 1984, to help with unmet financial necessities, not only for members, but also any member of the leather SM fetish community sponsored by a member. As of today, more than $160,000 has been distributed. I would like to ask David Katzenberg, president of the Chicago Hellfire Club, to please rise. Please hold your applause. I now ask John, also known as Skip Reddy, Inferno coordinator, to please rise. I now ask David Rosen, membership chair, to please rise. I now ask John Bradford, member at large of the board of directors and administrator of the McAdory Fund, to please rise. I now ask Chad Molinelli, member at large of the board of directors, to please rise. I now ask each associate, emeritus, full, honorary, and retired member of the Chicago Hellfire Club to please rise and stay standing. The Chicago Hellfire Club is truly humbled in receiving this honor from the Leather Hall of Fame. The Chicago Hellfire Club is what it is because of the groundbreaking ideals of those who came before us and in our ability to grow and change as our community changes. Without the vision of 13 men almost 43 years ago, the Chicago Hellfire Club would never have happened. We are grateful to what they started and share this award with all of them. On behalf of all those present and of every member of the Chicago Hellfire Club throughout the world, I say thank you. We are truly honored. Thank you.
I think we're running ahead of schedule a little bit. How about some photographs? Should we do that? Could I get everyone who would like to be in a photograph of the Chicago Hellfire Club to come up front and get a group photo? You don't have to, but come on up if you'd like to.